right, good morning and welcome to the Sunday Recap. This is a ministry of the United Methodist Church here in Farmington, Missouri, Memorial United. And at Memorial United, we are a unified family that relentlessly pursuing spiritual growth to spread God's love. While doing this ministry, we've gone a couple different pathways, and today we're going to take it a little bit different direction. As you noticed, I've got a guest co-host with me today, Pastor Scott Hall. He's going to be joining me today while we do this sermon recap. A little bit of backstory, as you may or may not know, Pastor Hall has faithfully served the United Methodist Church. Well, not necessarily the United Methodist Church, but you have faithfully served in service of God in a pastoral position for 50 years now, right?
That's correct. That's
50 years. That's an amazing amount of time. That's significantly longer than I've been alive. So he served in that leadership role within the church for 50 years. He's been here at Memorial for 7 years, and we'll kind of go over a little bit of that. So where were you? Just give me kind of a rundown of your history within the United Methodist Church or in pastoral leadership.
Oh, wow. I started in Concordia, Missouri in 1969. I was 19 years old. I was pretty young. And I had two churches there. It was a 2-point charge. Concordia, most people might know, was where the Missouri Synod, the Lutheran Church, had its beginning. And Concordia was a town of 2,000 people, and the Lutheran Church had 1,500 members. I had 88. Mm-hmm. We actually were the oldest church in town, but we were outnumbered by the Lutherans. I served there for 4 years and moved up to Wellington, Missouri for a couple of years. The DS asked me if I'd do that to get me closer to Kansas City, which is where I went to seminary. And then my first, what we call full-time appointment out of seminary was in the Brunswick Circuit, where I had 4 churches, 2 small towns, a freestanding country church in Brunswick, and I was there 6 years. And from there, I moved down to Higginsville, and while there, I completed 16 years in one district, which was kind of unusual back in those days. Bishop called me one day and wanted me to move to Raymore, which was a growing suburb of Kansas City. And sure enough, we did grow down there. We had a lot of young families and so forth. Served that church for a number of years, ended up going to Nevada, Missouri. And in Nevada, I married and inherited a family and kind of stepped out of the appointed system for a little bit and was chaplain at Cauty College for several years. I did the youth ministry at an Episcopal church, and then for a year I served as an interim pastor at a Lutheran church. So it was quite an experience in Nevada. And then the bishop kind of called me out of that retirement relationship to go to Aurora. And I was there a couple of years, went to Webster Hills in St. Louis, from there to here. So it's been a roundabout trip.
Man, you've been all over the place.
I have, and that's not unusual for Methodists. We move within a conference. And when I started out, we had 2 conferences in Missouri, the East and the West, and they have since joined. So we can move anywhere within the state of Missouri.
So what are your plans after, I guess, today?
Nothing.
Nothing?
No. Actually, I'm pastor here until the 1st of July. But I'm moving out of the parsonage a month early so the trustees can do some work on it, do some painting, have it prepared for the new pastor. So I'm on call for another month.
So that's something that you touched on in the sermon, and we'll run through a little bit of that today too. But one thing that I found interesting that you said that maybe you could expound on in this format is that the pastoral relationship as it relates to a new pastor leaving, or the pastor leaving and the new one coming in. I've been a lifelong Methodist, and I've only experienced this one other time, and I was young. So maybe you could expound on that process a little bit.
Yeah, our system of pastors coming to churches is different, a lot different than other denominations. Our system is an Episcopal system. The bishop makes appointments. And that's really the only power our bishop has. He has no vote at annual conference. He has no vote in any of the committees. But he appoints the pastors every year. And with that knowledge, if he asks something of us, that's pretty powerful. We're appointed for 1 year. Now, we can be appointed any number of years, but the appointment is for 1 year. And the way that system works is the bishop has a cabinet of district superintendents, And the district superintendent visits with the staff parish committee, pastor parish committee every year. Do you want to keep your pastor? Do you want a new pastor? Do you not care? And that information goes back to the cabinet, and they determined. Knowing that I was retiring, the pastor parish committee met with the district superintendent. They kind of outlined what they would like in a new pastor, and the bishop uses that and makes the appointment. And he's appointed the Reverend Ron Beaton to this church. He starts the 1st of July. I am no longer the pastor at the 1st of July, which means it's his church. And so we have a covenant among our pastors. We don't go back and do funerals, don't go back to do weddings, because it's no longer our church. Now, that doesn't mean we don't keep friendships. We do. We stay friends and we pray for each other, but it's no longer my church, and I understand that. And that's the way our system works.
So that's a very unique system, because outside of the United Methodist Church, that's not the case everywhere else, right?
A lot of churches do what we call a call system. They hire their own pastor, and they may go search for a pastor. And I think the Baptists talk about robbing another church to get their pastor. But every denomination does it a little differently. Bob Bullock's a Methodist pastor, has been serving Presbyterian the last 3 years while they look for a pastor. So a lot of churches, it can take some time. But in the Methodist Church, the bishop must have a pastor for every church, and every church must have a pastor. So there'll be no point in time where, when my appointment is over, that there's not going to be another pastor. It's the way our system works. The church doesn't wait to see how they can come up with another pastor. They get one immediately.
So we talked about how a new pastor is selected, and you said that goes to the pastor parish committee, and then the pastor parish committee, if I'm not mistaken, comes up with a list of items of kind of requests,
what
right?
they would like in the life of a new pastor, the different skills and abilities they feel the church needs.
So something that's important to think about here is that when we elect people into our pastor parish committee, that they are going to speak on behalf of the church,
Exactly.
right? So when we don't make those, we shouldn't make those appointments lightheartedly. Something that we should definitely take into consideration when those spots come open.
Yeah. And that's really the only actual power that a pastor has in the church, because I'm answerable to the bishop. Okay.
Right.
But the pastor, by discipline, is the chairperson of the lay leadership committee, which is a nominating committee, which kind of puts the pastor in the same position as the bishop in relationship to the local church. I chair that committee. And so I help that committee consider who the best people are for those positions. And we look at their skills and abilities just as the bishop does with pastors, trying to find the right people for the right committees.
So I wanted to make this day mostly about you, but I have to ask, because I think that our audience will want to know, in relation to Reverend Beaton, how do you think that he's going to fit in accordance with what our pastor parish committee asked for?
Oh, I think perfectly. They had a list of 12 things, and as I've gotten to know Ron, I think he fulfills all 12. He's half my age. They wanted someone younger, and they're getting someone younger. They hope to have someone with a family. He's got a family. He's had a fair amount of experience. He's served churches that aren't too dissimilar to Farmington. He's got a lot of energy, a lot of new ideas. I think he's going to be a good choice for Farmington, and I've said right along, I think Farmington's going to love him. We had a retired DS in church this morning, an old friend of mine who said he used to tell the churches when he was a DS, not only should the pastor tell you that you're going to like the new pastor, you need to consider helping the pastor like the church. And I thought that was quite insightful, that we need to be working at supporting him as he comes in with a new family and that sort of thing. Yeah.
And I have no doubt that the congregation here in Farmington, like you said that when you were at Webster Hills, that you'd kind of asked to be sent to small town Missouri.
Yeah, I did. I said to the bishop, I'd had my fill in the city. I said, send me to, I didn't care where, I said, send me to small town Missouri. And if you notice, I'm retiring to even a smaller town. I liked small town Missouri. There's a spirit in the small town. And I know a lot of people feel they can't break into small towns, but I haven't found that to be the case. I've always been able to make good friendships in small towns. Yeah.
Well, in Farmington particular, and particularly here at Memorial United, there's a very rich history, right?
Yes.
And something that maybe being from here all my life, I mean, I grew up just across the way in Elvins, but Farmington's always kind of been the big city for us from around here, and to get to know the history of Farmington. So I was down at Koljack, the local coffee shop, and there's a book that they have there that's the last 150 years or maybe 100 years, I can't remember, but it was a long, steeped history of Farmington, Missouri. And there's a huge write-up about Memorial United Methodist in that book. And to read through that and to see the history of this church, there are things that I didn't even know. But you spoke so eloquently on it this morning when you said that this church is known for service.
Yes, yeah, for serving the community. We have a reputation for being there for folks, and that's not only a great reputation to have, but it's the truth. This church has a lot of folks that see themselves in mission, and that's a big plus for this congregation.
There's also some other very unique points about this church, right? The one that you spoke on, first of all, and very important, we're not in debt, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's a minority of Methodist churches that don't have some kind of debt. But you've overcome whatever debt you had, and you've had families that have been wanting their ministry to continue by bequests to the church, and trustees have done an awfully good job making use of those bequests. We just gave out last week 4 scholarships for kids out of high school, graduating out of high school, going to college, and not kids anymore. But we were able to give out $3,500 worth of scholarships.
That's an amazing thing. I've got that listed in my notes here that we gave out. The scholarship committee offered 4 scholarships to. Now, were those? We don't have to disclose who they went to, I guess, but were they members of the church?
Yes, they were. They were all
received
4
those?
young people that have grown up in the church. Yep.
That's an amazing thing. With the cost of school, I mean, as we've talked, I'm going back, and it's amazing to me what it costs to go anymore. So that will definitely help them start off on the right foot. And then you also mentioned the Ministerial Alliance within the community of Farmington, not just as it relates to Memorial United.
Fantastic Ministerial Alliance here, like nothing I've ever seen anywhere else. A lot of times alliances get divided, the mainline churches and the Pentecostal church and that sort of thing. But gosh, these pastors from all kinds of backgrounds of theological thinking have worked so well together in this town. The thrift store and the food pantry is a result of that. The Help of Hunger came out of that. The Convoy of Hope now. It's a group that meets monthly that just works so well together. We do some community services, but it's mainly serving the community and mission and working together to do that.
What I think is amazing is that a lot of times you'll have kind of the cross-denominational rivalry, and that seems to be non-existent.
That's correct.
In this area.
Yeah.
There's none of that. I think that all of and this speaks to the community of Farmington, as it were, not just, like I said, as Memorial United or the Methodist denomination, but we in this area, especially as it relates to religion, have just kind of found this niche where we work together and we go arm in arm and help each other out. I know that I go down and help out the Catholics every year during Lent, and I help them out by donating my money to their little fish fry that they have. And then
which goes towards the cake that they win.
That's right, every year. So but I do it for the better of the community, Pastor Hall. So the cake that they win every year, touch on that. What's that all about?
Well, I don't know how many years back they started. I was told when I got here that I was going to be baking a cake for the Help the Hungry food sale, and apparently the pastors each year bake a cake, and they have a competition who has the best tasting, best looking, that sort of thing. So we all bake cakes, whether we can bake or not. We bake a cake. And oddly enough, apparently it was one of the first things the district superintendent told Reverend Beaton, that he was going to have to bake a cake when he came here. So he knows about it.
And from what I understand, he likes to win.
Yeah.
And he says
he wants to beat the Catholics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he may be bringing back a little bit of that cross-denominational rivalry.
Somebody needs to remind them they use holy water, so I don't know.
That's awesome. So another one of our ministries here that you touched on is Mums, and what an amazing...
It is amazing.
It's an amazing thing, isn't it?
She'd say, how many years did she say? 8 years, did she say?
I think so.
I know they were doing it before I came. A weekly dinner for those who have need of a meal. And also a lot of the seniors come just to have the fellowship. And they put out a good meal. I mean, it's a good meal. And but they have volunteers that cook every week. They have volunteers that serve every week. The food is donated every week. Barbara works hard putting together these little pieces of paper telling what food she needs, and none of them are more than $5. She spends a lot of time doing that. And this has been going on 8 years, and it's a great ministry. Yeah.
So I'm going to touch on that a little bit. Let's just think about that. She probably cooks. Do we know how many people, like just ballpark, that they try and? I think they try to cook for about 100 people, right?
I think they cook for about 150 because we do a lot of carryouts to the shut-ins.
Okay.
And then we like to be able to give seconds if they want more. And a lot of times they'll take some home too. So the idea is to give them plenty because sometimes it may be their only meal. It's just, yeah.
So I've gone to it a couple times myself, and Finley and Lane, my son and daughter, and Heather, my wife, go. And I just want to talk about that. Like, just organizing, getting the food purchased every week is a huge undertaking. She passes out slips, and each slip is less than $5, like you touched on. So, like I've talked on this podcast before, I've got young kids, and sometimes money gets tight, but I feel like I can always spend $5, and I feel like most of our congregation is that way. I can always, I'm not coming out of pocket $50 to buy spaghetti noodles, but I can come out $5, and that's just to be able to organize that each week is absolutely amazing to me.
And it's a system that's worked.
And it has absolutely worked. You go into Mom's and you see these people, and everybody's getting food. And like you said, I don't want to play this off. This isn't bad food. This is really, really good food. We had spaghetti. And last week, or week before last, I think it was week before last, we had spaghetti and cake, and Finley and Lane didn't eat all of theirs, so I took care of it for them. I hate to see any waste, So, and it was delicious. I loved it. That's one of the ministries here that you talk about. When you talk about the history, that forever will be a part of what we do here. Now, so we've talked about your history, we've talked about the history of the church. Now, you touched on in your sermon today the future of what this church as it relates to Memorial United. Where do you feel like we're going?
Well, they decided a couple of years ago to work with a consultation company called Unstuck. And they're trying to work their way through that. And it's been a struggle because we've had some folks that are resistant to change. But as I mentioned this morning, it's not that we're changing who we are or how we're doing ministry. It's kind of like remodeling. We like to have a modern kitchen and a modern bathroom, and a lot of people will go ahead and spend the money to remodel those things in their home. And that's kind of what we're doing. We're remodeling in a more modern way that will be attractive to a younger group of folks, and it's beginning to work. I mean, we've got some new families that are digging in, taking on leadership roles. So it's not overnight, but it's beginning to work, and we need to continue to be working on it.
But why can't we just stay the same?
Well, I guess we could. Somebody mentioned that the other night at a meeting. I want to go back to being what we used to be, and what I wanted to say that night and didn't, but I did today because it was my last Sunday. And if we were to listen to that logic, we'd still be using an outhouse.
That's right. I love that analogy. So one thing that I heard a long time ago along those same lines, a quote, and I don't know who it's by, but what got us here won't get us there.
Right.
And this church, from what I see, is moving in the right direction.
I think it is.
And we're going in the right way. Like you said, my family is young, so I speak from that demographic. And I'm telling you, frankly, that I believe in what this church is doing, and I am happy to be a part of it.
Good.
And from the group of people that have surrounded me since I've come into this church, I absolutely know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that if we stay the course with what our leadership has tasked us to do, I know that we will end up making disciples. And really, that's
the key.
That's the key, right?
Yep.
So you got to tell me about this dream that you had.
Oh, do I have to?
You have to.
Well, I had a covenant group that thought I should tell the congregation. I really was hesitant about it, but, when it's your last Sunday, you get a little more brave. It was about 3 months ago, and oddly enough, we had Don Jarvis was visiting today, and he had done a workshop gosh, it's probably 30 years ago that I went to a retreat, and the program was on dream interpretation, which I had never really given any thought to. And the basis of it is a lot of times we dream about things that worry us, and they become dreams. And I had this dream of this big, huge bicycle, and it was about like a 5-story building, big, huge thing. And it was a group of people trying to pedal it, and I recognized the people as the leaders of our church, the administrative council, working to keep that bicycle going. And as it came by, I saw the reason why they were working so hard. It had this huge wagon attached to it, and the wagon was carrying the congregation. And I recognized many of the people in the congregation, and I could see that there were so many why they were working so hard to get it pedaled. But then I went by and I noticed the tailgate was down, and on the tailgate was a handful of folks who were dragging their heels. And that's when I recognized why the leadership was working so hard and trying to struggle to make it happen when you had this little group that was kind of just dragging their heels. So my challenge to the congregation was pick up your heels, make it happen.
And at some point or another, I think that every person within a congregation, I mean, I can't speak, I guess, for everyone, but I can speak for myself. I think that I've been every person in that dream. I think I've been a person that's been working hard to drive. Mm-hmm. I think I've been a passenger, so to speak, and I think that I've been a person that has dragged my heels. I think that story, we probably all, or that dream, we probably all listen to it and immediately place ourselves in one place or another. But I think it's important to really actually take a look within and go, what have I done to drive, or what have I done to ride, or have I been dragging my heels? And like I said, in one time or another within my life, if I'm being honest, I think that I've contributed to every single one of those positions. And so I have to remind myself in prayer when I'm asking God to kind of guide me to try and I certainly don't want to drag my heels. But I also am not a rider, but I also don't want to always be the person trying to lead the charge and try to be the leader. But I think that it's important to take that dream and apply it to our own life, right? Mm-hmm. So you said something today that is going to stick with me for the rest of my life. And I will use it, I will steal it, and I will give you credit for it sometimes. You said that someone brought you in, and to be that someone mm-hmm. for someone. Mm-hmm. That's an amazing line. I don't know if that is just, I mean, you gave me for lack of a better load, a boatload of books yesterday from your theological library. And I don't know if that's something that came out of one of those, but that's absolutely beautiful.
No, it's just my own thought. I mean, I consider how I became part of the church and how I ended up in ministry is because people led me, people shared Christ with me, and I think it's true of all. I don't think there's anyone sitting out there that can't say, well, my relationship to church is really because of this event or this person being involved in my life. I think it's true of everyone.
That's right. I can think of the people that I mean, I hate to say this, but it's I'm honest to a fault. I was drugged kicking and screaming to church when I was a child. And it's not because I hated church. I always enjoyed it once I got here. But as a child, I was just a little bit indignant. And I can remember my mom and my dad and my grandmother and all these people, but they were these someones, mm-hmm. for lack of a better word, that you talked about. And that is a charge. And I believe that is exactly what it means to me to be an active member of a Methodist church. That's the charge that's given to me. We sang our last hymnal. What was it called?
The Charge to Keep I Have.
Yes. And that hymnal is this in song form, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah, we sing that at the end of annual conference every year after the appointments are read. So I had the opposite experience. I don't ever remember kicking and screaming and going to church. I always went to church wasn't a problem. But the church had a way of nurturing me. When I got to high school age, the church invited the high schoolers to come back and teach Sunday school. And so they kind of nurtured us that way and kind of gave us some leadership in the church by doing that. I can remember going to church camp, and one of my counselors ended up being a bishop. I can remember him sitting us down and kind of quizzing us whether or not we had considered any form of ministry as our career, and spending a great deal of time telling us the work of a pastor and the needs of the church of a pastor, which got me thinking about that. But every step of the way, there was someone or some entity of the church that was nurturing me along. And I think that's vital to those that are coming through the church. Yeah.
So that's a pretty big responsibility on
all of us,
on the body of the church.
And if you remember at our baptism services, we place that responsibility fully on the congregation.
Absolutely.
Whether or not they understand that is sometimes questionable, but they are given full responsibility to help raise that child up in the life of the church.
And when you join the church, you accept that responsibility.
Yeah.
So I think, did I cover everything that you got in your sermon?
I think so, although probably you had 3 different sermons to cover because I didn't write anything out this week, and so it could have been very different in each service.
I love the title of the sermon was...
Well, give credit to Pam Brooks for that. She said, "What's your title?" I said, "I don't have one." I said, "Pick something out," and she did.
Well, as Heather and I were moving your library yesterday, she said to me, I think tomorrow's going to be a tough sermon recap. I said, that's why I invited Pastor Hall to sit and join me. If it's going to be tough on me, I'm going to make it tough on him too. So It was not. It has always been a pleasure. I have reviewed or recapped tens of services now, and you have always been my favorite pastor to recap.
Well, thank you.
You've been hugely responsible for a lot in my life. As you know, as you mentioned today, I feel like I've been called into the ministry in some capacity, and I came to you with that, and you have mentored me just in the short time. I think that I've known you, been with you probably for about a year, maybe a little bit less than that, but your words have always stuck with me, and I've always respected the things that you had to say, and I want to say thank you on behalf of the church.
You're welcome.
And
You're welcome. And I want to say to you, you've done an excellent job in the exegesis of the sermons, and I say that because I really learned this when I was at the monastery, to really look at the detail of Scripture, and I do that now when I'm preparing a sermon. It's not just what's being said or being done, but what's the detail behind it. And there's a lot of nuances in that, and you do a good job picking up on those, and I appreciate that.
Well, I know we covered this, and you won't be my pastor anymore, but I'm still going to call and ask for help every now and then.
That's all right. You got my cell phone number.
So I do. And so let's talk a little bit about the upcoming month. You're on vacation.
Yes, actually, I'm on vacation, although 1 week of that will be at annual conference. You'll be there, too.
I will also be attending annual conference as a part of the laity. And then so we've got some lay speakers coming in, right?
Every Sunday is filled with lay speakers. Well, you got a couple of retired pastors.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've got the first Sunday Kurt Bauke, and then Daryl Green, and then myself,
and you.
And then the last Sunday
is
I can't remember his name.
Her name. She's a retired pastor. She retired out of St. Luke's and is now in Jackson, and I can't come up with a name either right now.
Well, we will keep that. We'll post that when we find it out. So this is your chance. This is it.
This was it.
This was it.
This was it.
Reflecting. How do you feel?
I feel okay. Spiritually, I feel okay. I am physically worn out. This move was not what I expected. I've always done my own packing, my own moving. And I've learned that when you get to be 70, you don't have the stamina you used to have. So it's been tough. But spiritually, I'm good. I think I have good confidence in the church. I have confidence in its ability to move on. I have confidence in their new pastor. I think Farmington's going to do great.
Well, Pastor Hall, from the bottom of my heart, and I normally don't like to do this, but I will speak on behalf of our congregation. all three services and say thank you. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
So remember to keep tuning in with us. We will post this podcast every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Our communications chair, Drew Hartenberger, has made that promise to me. We've got some editing to do, and we're figuring this out, and we're going to make that promise to the congregation. We want to be as regulated with this as possible. I want to get this out and have it in the hands so that that you can count on us. So like I said, look for us every Wednesday at 7 o'clock in the morning. We'll have this posted. And don't forget to come and join us here at church. That's what this is all about. We're trying to draw in and make new disciples. So if you're seeing this, if you're watching this and you're interested, come in and see us. As I mentioned, Pastor Hall here is my first guest. So I have to fill this seat every Sunday now, and that's a task that I have put onto the communications team as well as myself. So we've got to fill this chair with people, and the way that I want to do that is I want to bring in someone from each and every service. We have 3 services here at Memorial United. We have a 8 o'clock, which is a more gospel service, right? Yeah. And it's the music in there is just beautiful. And so I want to bring someone in from the 8 o'clock service. And then we have a 9 o'clock service. It's also awesome in its own right. It is a more contemporary service with the guitars and the drums. And it's a really cool service too. And I want to bring someone in from that service. And then from the 10:30, which is our more Methodist kind of traditional service. And I want to bring someone in from that. And I want to just get it on a rotational basis. Now, if you're keeping track at home, that's only 3, and there's 4 Sundays in the month. So the last thing we're going to do is I've got a pretty good in with the new youth minister. Good. And so we're going to bring in a youth on one of those Sundays. And those Sundays you should definitely tune in, because I have a feeling I'm getting to know the youth, and I'm telling you what, these kids down there are cracks, and they are just as funny as can be, and I can't wait to get them over there.
So who is the new youth director?
Oh, that's me. That's me, and I guess Mark Kaiser, I should touch on that. Mark and Pam have faithfully served our youth here at Memorial United for 12 years. Mm-hmm. That's a long time. Mm-hmm. I've only faithfully served my youth for, well, I guess Finley's 11, so almost 12, mm-hmm. and I've pulled my hair out every step of the way. So Mark and Pam, those are huge shoes for us to fill. He is leaving me with a great program, and we're just going to continue the momentum and continue to run uphill with that.
We should probably also mention that next Sunday, the 9 o'clock contemporary service is going to be at the park at the Country Days.
That's correct. At the Gazebo in Long Park, I believe is what that's called. So come and join us, and I hope to see you around. Thanks a lot.